Welcome to my speech, ladies and gentlemen. It's better to walk alone than in a crowd. Let me tell you something today that might go against the grain. It's better to walk alone than in a crowd. Why? Because the crowd is comfortable. The crowd doesn't challenge itself. The crowd doesn't rise early, doesn't stay late, doesn't ask the hard questions. The crowd settles, the crowd follows, the crowd survives, but doesn't thrive. And well, you weren't made for average. You were made for growth. You were made to stand out, not blend in. Now it's tempting, I know. The crowd gives you approval. The crowd pats you on the back. The crowd tells you, don't worry about it. Everyone's doing it this way. But here's the problem. Most people aren't doing it right. Most people aren't living with vision, with discipline, with purpose. So if you follow them, guess what you get? You get their results. And if their results aren't what you want, if their life doesn't look like the life you desire, you've got to be willing to break ranks. You've got to walk a different path. I remember when I made my own decision to change, I looked around and realized I had to start making choices not based on what was popular, but based on what was principled. That means some people don't understand you. That means some folks laugh. That means you're walking down the road, and for a while, you don't hear any applause. But I'll tell you what you do hear. You hear your conscience say, you're on the right track. You hear your mind get sharper. You feel your habits start to build. That's the reward. See, the real growth comes in the lonely moments. It comes when you push yourself. No audience, no cheerleaders, no shortcuts. Just you and your decision to be more, to do more, to rise above the norm. If you want the extraordinary, you can't hang around people satisfied with ordinary. Sometimes you've got to say, I'm not going with you, not because I think I'm better, but because I know I'm made for more. And yes, there will be moments when you feel alone, but let me remind you, that's where leadership is born, that's where self-respect is earned, that's where personal power is developed. The irony, walk alone long enough with excellence, and eventually others will follow your example, not because you fit in, but because you stood out. So when you come to the crossroad, comfort or courage, crowd or calling, choose the higher road, choose the harder path, choose the one that demands more from you because it will give more to you. And if it means walking alone, walk alone, but walk strong, walk focused, and most of all, walk free, because in the end, your destiny isn't found in the crowd, it's found in your commitment to who you're becoming, and that, my friend, is the walk worth taking. The crowd rarely chooses excellence because excellence demands more than what most people are willing to give. It's not that people are incapable of rising higher, but the truth is, the path to excellence is uncomfortable, unpopular, and often misunderstood. The crowd naturally leans toward what is safe, familiar, and convenient. It follows patterns, trends, and consensus thinking. But excellence requires stepping away from those very patterns and choosing to go beyond what is merely good enough. Most people in the crowd choose the easy way, not the best way. They do just enough to get by, just enough to not get fired, just enough to maintain the status quo. Excellence, on the other hand, demands going the extra mile, putting in more effort, and staying longer in the uncomfortable zones of learning, discipline, and improvement. And because that road doesn't come with applause or guarantees, many avoid it altogether. The crowd often avoids excellence because it exposes inadequacy. When someone rises above, it shines a light on what others have refused to pursue. It reveals the price of laziness, indecision, and procrastination. So rather than be inspired, many in the crowd will criticize or ignore those pursuing greatness. It's more comfortable to pretend that average is acceptable than to confront the truth that they've chosen less than what they were capable of. Excellence also requires personal responsibility, something the crowd resists. In the crowd, you can hide, you can blame circumstances, you can echo the voices of others without standing for anything yourself. But to chase excellence, you must own your choices, your direction, and your growth. That's a heavy burden for many who prefer comfort over challenge. It's far easier to say, everyone else is doing it, than to say, this is my standard and I'm holding to it. The crowd likes company. Excellence often walks alone. While the crowd gathers in agreement, excellence stands in commitment. The crowd wants validation. Excellence is built on conviction. If you want to be excellent, you may have to walk in a different direction, think differently, and act differently than those around you. That's lonely work. That's uphill work. But it's the kind of work that builds uncommon strength and uncommon results. There's also a psychological pull in the crowd, a false security. When you're in the crowd, you feel like you're doing okay simply because others around you are doing the same, but that's dangerous. It's a trap. Just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean it's right, and just because something is normal doesn't mean it's healthy or wise. Excellence requires you to think for yourself, question the norm, and raise the standard. And that doesn't happen in groupthink. It happens in solitude, in study, in reflection, in discipline. Look at any field, sports, business, the arts, education, and you'll see that the most excellent people were the ones who separated from the crowd. They trained longer, studied deeper, took more risks, and stayed committed when others quit. Excellence isn't handed out in groups. It's earned through individual effort and persistence. The crowd may cheer when the result shows up, but it almost never walks the process with you. The path to excellence is paved with sacrifice. You give up short-term pleasure for long-term purpose. You give up fitting in for rising above. The crowd avoids that trade. It wants immediate gratification. It wants shortcuts. It wants the reward without the responsibility. But excellence knows there's no elevator to success, only stairs, and they're steep. Even in thinking, the crowd chooses repetition over reflection. It regurgitates opinions without examination. It mimics instead of mastering. Excellence digs, questions, and challenges assumptions. It's more than skill, it's mindset. And that mindset doesn't come from following crowds. It comes from choosing clarity, integrity, and growth even when no one else is watching. And maybe that's the real difference. The crowd performs for others. Excellence performs because of inner standards. The crowd waits for someone to lead. Excellence decides to lead itself. The crowd is reactive. Excellence is intentional. It's easy to belong to the crowd. It's easy to nod along, do what's expected, and stay in line. But excellence isn't found in comfort of the familiar. It's found in the places most avoid, in long hours, hard decisions, and quiet commitment. That's why the crowd rarely chooses excellence. It costs too much, it demands too much, it stretches too much. But for the few who break away, who decide that average is not enough, and who embrace the lonely, difficult, purposeful path, excellence becomes not just a result, but a way of life. It becomes a quiet power, a set of choices, and a legacy. And while the crowd may never understand it, excellence never needed their approval, only your decision to pursue it. Independent thinking builds strong character because it forces a person to stand on the strength of their own convictions rather than the shifting opinions of others. It requires discernment, courage, and the ability to examine ideas without blindly adopting them. When a person begins to think independently, they start making choices that reflect their values, not just their surroundings. This discipline of thought lays the groundwork for a life built on integrity rather than imitation. When you think independently, you become responsible for your decisions. You no longer get to say, "I did it because everyone else was doing it." You have to ask hard questions. You must evaluate ideas based on truth, not popularity. And that act of filtering what you hear, read, and see through the lens of your personal values develops the internal muscles of wisdom, courage, and conviction. Strong character is not inherited. It is built in the furnace of decisions that are not made for you, but by you. Independent thinking removes the need for constant approval. Instead of seeking validation from others, the independent thinker seeks alignment with truth. That alignment becomes a compass that guides them even when the crowd walks a different path. That strength to walk differently, to believe differently, to act differently is a core sign of character. It shows that someone has found a reason deeper than opinion or trend and has chosen to live by it. Strong character demands self-awareness. It means knowing who you are, what you believe, and why you believe it. Independent thinking fuels that self-awareness by encouraging reflection. It says, don't just accept and investigate. Don't just echo, understand. That process of reflection creates a deeper, wiser, and more honest version of yourself. You begin to shed the masks that society encourages and instead wear the truth of who you are. In a world of noise, independent thinking is quiet strength. It doesn't shout for attention or chase applause. It stands still when others rush. It waits when others panic. That stillness, that ability to reason in the storm, forges a character that does not sway in the wind of temporary voices. That character becomes trustworthy, not because it is flawless, but because it is rooted in something deeper than emotion or influence. To think independently, one must accept responsibility. It's easier to borrow someone else's idea. It's easier to copy someone else's path, but it takes maturity to say, let me understand this for myself. And that maturity begins to harden into steel when it is tested, when people disagree, when pressure mounts, when shortcuts appear. The person who has trained themselves to think rather than conform will always have an advantage in life, not only because they make better decisions, but because they become the kind of person others can rely on when it matters most. Character is not formed in the crowd. It is formed in moments of solitude, reflection, and decision. Independent thinking draws a line between what is convenient and what is right. It chooses the hard path when the easy one is full of followers. It says no when the world says yes, not out of rebellion, but out of principle. And it says yes when others are afraid to act, because its compass is not fear, it is truth. Strong character is the fruit of difficult thinking, and that thinking must be done alone. You cannot borrow someone else's clarity. You must earn your own. When you go through the process of wrestling with ideas, testing your beliefs, and refining your purpose, you don't just become smarter. You become stronger. You become stable. You become steady. You become someone who can lead others because you are not being led by every voice. Independent thinking helps a person rise above manipulation. It makes them less vulnerable to false promises, emotional persuasion, and empty trends. It guards the mind from deception because it builds the habit of examination. It asks, what is the motive? What is the source? What is the truth beneath the words? That habit becomes a shield, and that shield is part of the armor of character. When a person thinks independently, they begin to live deliberately. They don't just drift, they choose. They design their life, their habits, their goals, and their values based on truth, not pressure. That deliberate living creates a person who is consistent, and consistency is one of the clearest signs of strong character. Strong character does not mean perfection. It means resilience. It means someone who falls, but falls in the right direction, toward growth, toward truth, toward becoming better. Independent thinking builds that resilience by teaching a person how to stand back up, reevaluate, and move forward again. It removes the fear of failure because it replaces external expectations with internal principles. In the end, independent thinking is not just about the mind, it's about the heart. It is about becoming someone who is not led by every passing idea, but by the deeper call to be true, honest, wise, and courageous. That kind of person may not always be popular, they may not always be applauded, but they will always be remembered for the strength of their character and clarity of their path.